Kwong YingKi is going to be talking about complex enterprise projects. So are there any simple ones?
There are some.
Okay.
I was trained in physics, so I like to make analogy with physical system and physical concepts. You know, previous speakers have spoke extensively about the pace of change and the importance of communication. I'm going to approach these two concepts from a somewhat different perspective. I mean, this slide is kind of interesting. At the top, you see, there's a date, a year, 1859. That's a long time ago, isn't it? And this year, of course, is 2020. As much as we feel that the pace of change is rapid, there are certain things that actually do not change a whole lot. And that is crucial, especially for mature enterprises, because those folks that work in startups, of course, feels that they're in a position to change the world, and frequently that feelings is not necessarily consistent with outcome. But what is true is that the majority of IT expenditure is in mature industries. That's not that surprising because what we do day to day, from healthcare, retail, transportation, I mean, these are very mature industries. They've been around frequently hundreds of years, if not 100 years or more. And so that's kind of a context I want to start with. The theme is 2020, and 2020 is one way to talk about vision, right? So what's 2020 vision? And the inability for one to see with 2020 vision usually is because of aberration in your eye. That's an optical aberration. And I submit for your consideration that with enterprise IT projects, frequently the vision about the project is subject to a form of enterprise aberration in mindsets. Here's supposed to be humorous, I guess. It is very possible to go into a project, especially in state government. The previous speaker talked about change in the state of Washington. We use very similar terminology in the state of Oregon. Folks have an understanding after some planning process. They think they understand the requirements pretty well, and you hire a contractor based on these requirements, and the contractor would do their work, and things seem to be going well. And in government, we frequently define requirement at a high level, and the contractor, one of their first deliverable would be to work with state staff, the change agents within the state, to define what the new requirement, the new vision, and the new to-be state of the enterprise might look like. And then these details has to be elaborated. And once elaborated with some understanding, you could be doing it in an iterative kind of way, and maybe you have a lot of user stories, and then you start doing the work, and then you get back these reports. The sprints are going well, everything is on schedule, on budget, all the resources are there. Like this gardener with the mower, he's going really great, and he's saying to himself, this will get rid of the weeds for sure. And then meanwhile, some of the stakeholder may say, well, shouldn't we replant, and maybe we should consider slowing down and maybe use some chemical weed killers. No, that's out of scope. We got to control scope creep. And then what's the outcome is that a lot of time, projects that are apparently even on budget, on schedule, and the sprints are proceeding as planned, may not give the necessary business outcomes. And that's a very serious problem for mature enterprises that want to go from one state to the next. The fact about change is, this is a term that Thomas Kuhn used in describing the structure of a scientific revolution, normal activities or projects in this case, versus those things that require paradigm shift. This is very important for enterprise change initiatives, leveraging information technology to do things that are fundamentally different. Your enterprise may be going through a change to a new operating model, for example, or multiple organizations may be coming together to form a new enterprise through merger acquisitions. These are fundamental change of the operating model, and they are to be contrasted with what Thomas Kuhn would refer to as normal activities in the field or in the enterprise in this case. So this picture illustrates the challenge when you have a paradigm shift. If the little goldfish connote the enterprise participants, trying to go from the as-is state, which is the left smaller fishbowl, to what you think is a more optimal, nicer, bigger fishbowl, what can go wrong? Well, from those of us that have a little bit of training in science, that transition state, from one side to the next, a lot of things can happen. The fish jump up, didn't have enough energy, you can fall off and in between the two bowls, and then what happened to the fish? It's worse off than before, isn't it? And then you're traversing this path, and you can see there are many paths to get to the same endpoint. So which one is better? Well, it's hard to say. Sometimes a path that appears to be lengthier, possibly on the surface look more costly, may actually be a better path because organizations that are mature, there is organizational culture, there are ways that different people get used to doing certain things a certain way, and all these things amounts to a sort of resistance to change. So how you traverse that path is also important. And last but not least, once you get to the end point, is the environment well prepared? You could end up in a new pond where the water is polluted, not optimal. And so one thing about transformational changes is not a guarantee that when you're done, you would necessarily be at a better place. And certainly for the improvement, the enterprise change initiative that you want to bring about, the end result may very well be much less optimal than you have hoped for. So that's the important concept. So what constitute the corrective lenses for enterprise vision? And I put forth here a few important things. The first thing, go back to the concept of a paradigm change. If you read Thomas Kuhn, he'll talk about that paradigm change is fundamentally about mindset changes of the participants. It's more of a sociological thing than a scientific thing, even when you're talking about a scientific discipline. So how do you go about bringing mindset changes among the players? The most important thing is to recognize that organization has a kind of culture on the one hand, but it also has different functions. And the different functions might have a difficult time communicating even when there's no change. Now, when it comes to change, there needs to be a sort of commonly shared language about the change. Specifically, there needs to be a distinction between what I refer to as normal projects versus those projects that are paradigm shifting. And how do you go about achieving a common language and a common vision? And that relies heavily on the ability to have share experiences. That could be through training, that can be through dialogue, that can be through any number of different mechanisms through which people can develop a common view and vision about how that change might look like. The philosopher Wittgenstein said that if you were a lion, you wouldn't understand what the lion is saying because you have no common experiences with the lion. So You need a language, but you also need to share experiences in order to have the ability for the whole organization to learn together to achieve organization learning. Last, and this is that time scale thing I was talking about, organizations, countries have cultures. Cultures are very long-lasting, especially for a mature organization, but even for a group of people that quickly get together to do a project. If it transcends different functions in an organization, and if it transcends different geographies, then it's very important to respect the fact that different professions and different professionals have a certain types of culture that you have to kind of deal with. And then if you have global projects involving different countries, then national culture become a very important aspects of that. That in the context that within an organization, at the same time, you may have an organizational culture that persists and may be very time-consuming to bring about mindset changes. And that, I submit, is a somewhat different perspective with our organizers' view that the pace of change may be accelerating, but certain things don't change as quickly as we would like, and that has to be factored in order to bring about transformative changes of any type in any profession, in any enterprise, in any segment of the market that you may be approaching. Thank you.